chase, and no matter what, I'm living without everything. I got a dream to chase, and no matter what, I'm living.
Joining us today. This is the 10th meeting of the Rotary year 2021-2022. I'm your host for the evening. My name is President Wilson Kamau from the Great Club of Nairobi, Madaraka. I'd like to kick off this meeting by inviting Rotarian Corinne to lead us with the Rotary Grace. Rotarian Corinne, please go ahead. Sorry. Sorry, as she prepares, actually, I've forgotten something. This thing is my brain. So I officially call this meeting to order.
Sorry, President Wilson.
Yes, but go ahead, Corinne.
Hi, everyone.
Hello.
Hi, sorry, I'm doing this. Hi, I'm doing this en route. Hope you're all well. We can all just believe and say grace together. Oh God and giver of all good, we thank thee for our daily food. May God, friends, and the very way help us all our days. Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much, Rotarian Corinne. I think we lost you for a minute, but thank you so much. So I'd like to propose a toast. If you have a glass, charge it. If you don't, hand over heart. A toast to the President of the Republic of Kenya.
To the President.
Thank you. I would now like to invite Rotarian Njoki Ndongo to lead us in the forward test. Rotarian Njoki, please go ahead.
Thank you, President Muto. We can recite the forward test together of the things we think, say, or do. Is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendships? Will it be beneficial to all concerned?
Thank you, Njoki, but we are President Wilson. I have to emphasize.
What did I say? What did I say? What did I say?
President Muto.
Thank you, Njoki, for that manifestation. I receive it.
Oh my God. My apologies.
Anyway, fine. The essay is on record.
Essay, I'll pay my fine. Oh dear.
Now I'd like to give this opportunity for visiting Rotarians, visiting guests, or any Rotaractors on the call to say their name and what they do and how they got to learn about this meeting. So I'd like to kick off this session by inviting, seeing here, Anita Kingori. Please go ahead and tell us your name, or tell us what you do and how you got to learn about this meeting.
Okay, good evening, everyone. I'm Anita Kingori, Rotary Club of Karen. I got the invite from our WhatsApp group for RCK. So I'm happy to be here.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, I'm a HR consultant.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. Also on the call, I see Lucy Gatheru.
Good evening, everyone.
Evening.
Yeah, my name is Lucy Gatheru. I'm an aspiring Rotarian from Madaraka.
Awesome, Lucy. Thank you so much for joining us again. I see you've been
Thank you.
an ardent follower of our club. Thank you so much. Noreen needs no introduction. Let us jump at your time.
Thank you.
The opportunity. Noreen is almost a member. Pesh, Karibu, you've been lost. Say hi to people, Pesh. I don't think she can hear us. I see here Titus Mulumba.
Hi Wilson, hi everyone. Yeah, my
Hi.
name's Titus Mulumba. Yeah, I saw it's on WhatsApp status for Wilson. I'm a guest here, so just wanted to see what happens here and also to listen today.
Awesome, Titus. Thank you so much for joining us today. Here, Victor Kenneth.
Hello everyone, I'm Victor Kenneth Baraza. I'm a Rotaractor from the Rotaract Club of UN Africa, and I'm glad to be here.
Thank you so much, Kenneth, for joining us once again. I have seen you in a couple of the meetings. Thank you so much. And lastly, I see Winnie Mengach. Winnie, we can't hear you. You are muted, but we can't.
Hello?
Yeah, now we can hear you, Winnie. Go ahead.
Yeah, yes. So I am Winnie Mengech. I am in development finance, and I got the invite from Wilson. I'm happy to be here and looking forward to the session. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Winnie. And what Winnie failed to mention, she is a former classmate of mine. So thank you so much for coming. I appreciate it so much. Thank you so much, guys. I hope I've not forgotten anyone. I see Innocent. Thank you so much for coming. Innocent is a Rotaractor from UN Africa. Always a pleasure to host you. Yeah, yes, I've seen here Trufosa Oguna, if I forget.
Good evening. My name is Trufosa Oguna. This is my third Madaraka Monday. I have been here courtesy of Malaki. Yes, and I'm an accountant by profession. I do freelance accounting. Yes.
Thank you so much, Trufosa, for coming, for joining us once again. I appreciate you joining us today evening. So let's close that session for now. We will, if you are a guest or a Rotaractor that missed out on, just please put your name and details on the chat. We'll be able to interact as you go along. The next session, I would like to now give it for announcements. So I'll start with the club, and I would like to invite Rotarian Joaquin Tongo to give her announcement.
Thank you, President Wilson. Good evening, friends and family of Rotary. I come to you to request our Rotary Madaraka members to please fill out the club membership survey, which was sent to our official WhatsApp group. This will close tomorrow at 7 p.m. So just kindly requesting each and every one of us who's a member of the club to please take a few minutes. It will not take you more than 5 minutes. Fill it out so that we can see ways of how to improve our club. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rotarian Joki. I would like now to offer the floor for any visitor or Rotarian Rotaractor with an announcement. Please raise your hand so that we can allow you this opportunity. Okay. Anyway, thanks. Thanks for that. If there's no other announcement, we'll go straight to our introduction of our guest speaker. I'll now invite Rotarian Victor Muto to go ahead and introduce our guest speaker for today's evening. Muto.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good evening, everyone. I have the distinct honor of introducing our guest speaker this evening. His name is Kevin Mutiso. He's an African fintech entrepreneur and CEO of Alternative Circle Technology Solutions, which is a Kenya-based fintech solutions company. Kevin is a visionary who aspires to positively impact 1 billion lives by 2030 through his entrepreneurial pursuits. A market man by training, his ambition to build new large markets on and for the African continent. His 15 years of experience as a serial entrepreneur involves having founded or co-founded a last mile retail chain, a new age media production company, and lobbying on behalf of industry through the Digital Lenders Association of Kenya and the Emerging Entrepreneurs Network. Kevin believes his unique insights can bring the informal market into the 21st century. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Kevin Mutiso. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I don't know if there's any protocol and all other members. It's a real pleasure to be here. Just one correction, Alternative Circle was my previous startup. Now I am the CEO of a new startup called OEA Platform Solutions, and I'll talk about it a little bit later. I'd just like to thank the Rotarian and the Rotaracts, and in particular, my colleague Wilson Kamau in digital lending for inviting me here. It's a real honor. I've never been to one of these meetings, so today I've sort of seen the inside. I've always wondered, so thank you. Today's talk is titled How to Build $1 Million Startups in Africa. The objective of these talks is I try to plant a seed in the audience to look at entrepreneurship and opportunity in a different way. And those insights have been gained in the last 15 years. I'm one of those people that started working straight out of high school in 2006, and my first job was on the stock exchange at Suntra Investment Bank. I worked on the Kengen IPO. I was an intern, so nothing special. I then worked there for about a year, and when I was there, somebody asked me to join their chama to help them manage their money. When I got there, turned out it was a little bit larger than a chama, and so we were making real, value investments. I think they're always the most notable ones. If you've ever heard of Exclusive Toilets, we were one of the first investors. If you've ever heard of Susie Beauty, we were one of the first investors. And then, of course, a lot of real estate. Because I didn't go to college, I call that my undergrad. I then decided to join entrepreneurship, naked, jumped into the deep end. My first foray full-time was into sort of logbook lending back in 2011. I was fortunate to have been analyzing an opportunity at my previous area and my previous place of work, and I sort of thought that this was a great business to be in. I liked the numbers, and I had a friend who was moving back, and there seemed to be an opportunity to do something together, and so we started our first lending business then. We partnered with a wealthier family here in Nairobi. And did that for 5 years, were profitable in 18 months. And went pretty well until some bad luck happened. That wasn't, it's very common in Africa. And if you see me privately, I'll explain. And that I call my master's degree because it was quite insightful. I got to lend to over 1,000 clients. I got to see different value chains and different businesses, particularly in the SME sector, a lot of tourism. And I also just built a very good network of entrepreneurs during that time. And then when we were there, I was already working on a digital lending product. And so in 2016, I decided to start a startup. I didn't really know what that was then, but and I'll tell you what it is now. But I sort of had this idea where, you know, because I knew the pieces that were required to put lending together, having done it already, and not just in Nairobi, but also in Mombasa, I figured it would be pretty interesting to be able to do lending on a digital platform. So we tried to create a product called Shika. It wasn't too different from Tala maybe 3-4 years ago. So if you've ever used Tala or Branch, it was quite similar. Ran that for 4 years. Then last year, because of COVID, our business had to shut down. Great story. If you ever catch me on the side, I'd love to tell that story. I call that my PhD. And then, because that taught me a lot, I traveled the world. I pitched in, you know, very big rooms in Singapore, US, the UK, with Mauritius, Kenya. I learned a lot because I did a lot of accelerator programs in China with Alibaba, in Singapore with the Monetary Authority of Singapore, India, and many others. So we trained quite a bit. And then, of course, I built a wonderful network at the Digital Lenders Association of Kenya, fellow fintech entrepreneurs, and then, of course, now interacting with government. So that's my experience in a nutshell. The way I'll do this talk today will be in 3 parts. I usually start with sort of definitions so that the audience understands what I'm saying. Sometimes the jargon can get a little bit geekish and maybe too sector specific. So I'll just define a few things. I will then move to the key success factors for a successful startup. And these key success factors, they're not sort of finished. I've only given the most important ones, 6 of them. And I'll tell a story about each of those. And then the final step will be the 4 stages of a startup, what to expect, and then plant the seed that I said I'm here to plant. So let's start. And then I imagine there'll be a Q&A. My talk should take about 30 minutes afterwards, and I'm open to questions about anything. So capitalism is the first thing I'd like to define. Capitalism is usually defined as, the textbook rather, definition is a system and society where societies, trade and industry are managed by the private sector for profit rather than government. From an entrepreneur's perspective, capitalism is the craft you must master. You know, so if you're a carpenter, you know, you have to master carpentry. With entrepreneurship, it's capitalism. Capitalism is the exchange of value for profit between 2 parties. That exchange of value happens in a marketplace. So the marketplace is, you know, and for visualization purposes, think of it as a playing field. And then the entrepreneurs are the players, and then they're playing entrepreneurial games which exchange value with each other for profit. You can imagine the referees as government and regulators, etc., etc. So that's how I define capitalism. The second definition is money. Money is 2 things. It's usually thought of as the end or the objective of capitalism, but that's completely false. Capitalism is about the creation and capture of value for oneself, for society, for community. But capitalism is that exchange of value and then capturing it for whoever you want to capture it for. But money is not the end. So money is 2 things. Money is the store of value. So it's how you can measure value that's created and how you can measure value that's captured. And then it's a means of exchange. So if you create, a good example is if you make a car for 1 million shillings and the costs, you know, that's the creation of the value, and you exchange the value at 1.5. you use money to exchange that value. So two things. Store value, means of exchange. The third definition is risk. Risk is that which destroys capital. So a really good example of that is, I'm sure you've all seen a kiosk around you, and imagine if that kiosk got on fire. So the fire destroyed that value, all the stock in there. So that's fire risk. So anything that can destroy value during the creation of that value, or the exchange of that value, or the storing of that value is risk. And then a startup, so that we understand how to build startups. So a startup has several attributes, but the main ones are around business model and objectivity. So the business model, it does one of two things. Either disrupts a business model, right? So there's an incumbent business model in the game or in the market that solves a particular problem. And actually, that's what I should have started with. The first attribute a startup has that it has a well-defined problem statement, where it says it comes to solve a problem, and a unique problem. And I'll explain why that unique problem is important later on, but it has to solve a problem, and it's a very well-defined problem statement. A good example would be something as simple as Facebook, whose problem statement is, how do we get people to connect better, right? So they were trying to solve for connection between two parties. They probably had a better way of saying it than I just did, but that was their problem statement. So startup has a well-defined problem statement. The second thing is around business model, and I'd already said what the first thing is. It disrupts an existing business model. So the problem is already being solved somehow, but now your startup comes to disrupt that business model and create a new business model, or it creates a whole new market from scratch. And a good example of disruption is Google. So a lot of people, I don't know if you've seen Google's business model, but it's a lot around advertising. And what is the advertising business? The advertising business is one party wants to make their business or product or whatever more visible to a larger audience. And then somebody owns the audience and they sell that audience at a price. And people like Google, what they did, or Facebook, is they basically flipped media on its head and created a whole new type of media, social media, and sort of put the incumbents now against the rope. So the newspapers, TVs, and you can see now they're all having to rethink and rejig their working models. A good example of something that is Blue Ocean, right, which is that new business model, is search, right? No one knew search was anything or had a market, but turns out there is. And to this day, you know, search is one of the most interesting markets there is. And then the third thing a startup must have in terms of attribute is that it must want to be big, right? It must want to be huge. So the reason you don't see many startups is because many of them fail, but those that make it become really big, impactful companies. So, you know, you can just think of any tech business today or any from the 1960s, for example, and you'll see that element of wanting to be big. So they usually start very small, and that's why they're usually confused with SMEs, which is completely wrong to do, because an SME is playing a game that isn't redefining anything, whereas a startup aspires to be big, but they usually start at the same size and then one grows to be big and impactful. Now, I want to then now move to speak about the key success factors required to have a successful startup, right? So I've talked about three major attributes. Now, those attributes need to be paired with some factors so that you become successful. The first thing is the entrepreneur, right? So the entrepreneur, like any other field or craft, must go through a lot of training. So just like the way you wouldn't go to a doctor who's been training for 2 years. You want somebody who's gone through school the 6 years and practice maybe 2, 3 years, maybe 10, maybe even 20. It's quite similar for entrepreneurship because entrepreneurship is actually a skill of making strategic decisions over time and good long-term decisions. So experience is important for successful entrepreneurs. And so the entrepreneur and the startup is key. Now, here's another misconception. Usually startups are perceived to have young founders, and that's actually like a very Silicon Valley and African sort of context. But when you look at fintech, for example, the average age of a successful fintech founder is actually mid-40s. I think the number is 46. So you can see why in fintech 46 is where the successful founder will be, because building digital financial services requires you to have some deep financial services experience, because you have to know how the financial services ecosystem works, because it's so compliant heavy, it's dealing with money, etc, etc, etc. So that's just a context for you to understand the entrepreneurship. The second piece is team. So team is important. I think if you watch football, I don't know if you're watching football, but like PSG makes no sense right now. It has Mbappe, Messi, and Neymar at the front. So if you had, if you were playing against that team, you'd be scared. And that's the same in startups, right? If you've got your Bulls team 1997, where you've got Michael Jordan, Scottie Pippen, Dennis Rodman, Steve Kerr, you're going to play a good team. You're not coming, that team is coming to win. So team is important. The other important thing is timing. Startups are usually solving a very unique problem statement, and then of course they're disrupting a business model, and then they're aspiring to be big. So there's a term in the startup sort of training that you learn, which is called the inflection point. This is when a series of things has happened over time that allows you to take over a market opportunity and scale quickly, which is what a startup wants to do, take advantage of timing. And the best way to sort of illustrate timing is if you ever played, when you're growing up, the skipping rope, where you had two people on one side and then you were timing to jump in and then sort of jump for as long, and the person who jumped the longest won. That's how you can visualize timing. And I can give you a context for timing, like with M-Pesa. If M-Pesa was a solution in 1999, great, but like there wasn't enough smartphone penetration. You didn't have a telco that was well capitalized. There wasn't a unique problem in terms of moving value from the villages at a similar rate that sort of proved that the market is ready. So M-Pesa also worked because of the time it came into play. And I'm sure if you even go deeper into that analogy, you'll find even more variables that made it more likely to succeed at that point, right? Excuse me. And then the other obvious one, or rather not obvious one, but relevant one is TAM, total addressable market. So when I defined problem statement, I was saying, the problem statement must be well defined, but there's another part to that equation which is how many people are afflicted by that problem and how many people are willing to pay to have that problem solved in the way you think it should be solved, right? So there's some unique problems that could solve, interesting challenges, but if the market is 10 people or 20 people or 50 people, that isn't defined as startup because it's not solving, something that's, going to be big and impactful. So your total addressable market is key. Social media is a great example. When Facebook started out, they probably didn't think that they wanted to go to everyone. It started in the colleges, but once they hit that point where they figured out what makes it tick, they could then jump into the rest of the world, and that's what makes it big, because they were able to solve that big problem. The other thing is context, not to be interchanged with timing. Context is more around your physical location. A good example here would be, smartphone penetration is getting to peak in Africa. You've got telco penetration sort of peaking as well. You've got a nice youth bulge coming, so that's a new market and new shifting demographics coming. But it depends on where you're sitting in Africa, right? So if you're sitting in Nairobi, you probably could take advantage of these inflection points and unique advantages. But if you're sitting in some places in like South Sudan right now, you could have the best team, the best entrepreneur, capital, but are you going to be able to be successful? So context really matters. And then the final key success, not the final, but one of the most, I think is the most important key success factor is luck, right? So luck is just that thing that, people say opportunity meets preparedness. That is true. I've seen that in my own life. I've seen that, and if you read any successful entrepreneur's life, and even if you look at your own life, you'll see a lot of the big breaks you got were because of some lucky thing, and you were prepared because you have been to take advantage of that lucky thing. But I love using the Barack Obama illustration to prove this point, because in 2004, 2005, when Barack Obama, Mr. President, was thinking about his next journey, the idea of being president sort of had always been his thing, but now I think he had now starting to be more intentional about it and thinking about it. And we all remember the 2006 Democratic speech at the convention, which was that moment when I think it was, I don't know, somebody sort of asked him, do you want to say a speech? And he said, yes. And he knew that at that moment that this was his one chance to show America that he could be the leader. And he swung for the fences and hit. And so that's what luck is. He got the opportunity to speak at the Democratic Convention, but then he used that moment to swing for the fences. And I think that's the best illustration of luck and a very key success factor for a successful entrepreneur, a successful startup. So I'd like to close that section off with a quote by Sun Tzu. He's a strategist. Every entrepreneur should read this. It's a very short book. If you know thy enemy and you know thyself, you need not fear the result of 100 battles. If you know yourself but not thy enemy, for every victory gained, you will also suffer defeat. If you know neither the enemy nor yourself, you will succumb in every battle. And so I hope this illustrates is the toughness of the journey of building a startup, where the entrepreneur has to learn how to control three things: their ego, their bias, and their fear. And so self-knowledge is key to the success of any entrepreneur who's going to lead any startup. And I hope that quote sort of illustrates that. Now, the 4 stages of a startup. They are 4 stages, as I said. Of the 4 stages, they're titled ideation. So when you come up with the idea, experimentation. So this is when it's small and looks a lot like an SME. Scale. This is when it's now moving to become a large corporate. Maturity is when it's a large, impactful business. So ideation. Ideation is the stage when you are sort of putting your problem statement and creating a thesis. So you've identified a problem and you're trying to solve that problem, some kind of thesis, right? Currently, my new business is around boda bodas, and the problem statement was financial services companies are not giving this particular demographic the kind of care they need. But in addition to that, this demographic has a trust issue in financial services. And so there's a lot of mistrust. So the way we've designed our new solution is by creating trust and giving them something in the beginning and not taking anything from them for a while, right? That way we build trust. So that's the ideation phase. And so that the way we've designed that sort of solution is now what we're going to take to the experimentation phase. During the ideation phase, what you're really is asking questions, you're interacting with the people who are afflicted by the problem you've identified. There's a common thing in startups, and this actually happened to me the other day because I happen to sit in many forums where I'm evaluating startups, and somebody had built a solution. It was one of the most beautiful UXs I'd ever seen for a particular demographic, and I forget which one it was, but that entrepreneur had not spoken to anyone who would use that product. So team definitely there, entrepreneur definitely going through his journey. So not yet mastered the craft, but definitely going to get there because of you can see the competency in thinking through a product. But wasted all that time because they didn't actually talk to the problem, the person who has the problem, and sort of test different types of solutions with them. And so for example, I spent hours with boda riders, even riding on some of them. And if you know me, I'm a really chubby guy. It was quite scary, but it has to be done, right? The next stage is experimentation. So here's what you're trying to do is you're trying to figure out what key metrics are important. You're trying to see if the product works. You're trying to sort of measure your cost of acquisition. You're trying to measure your retention cost. You're trying to measure, where drop-offs happening here. So you're just looking at a lot of data with, a core user demographic and trying to figure out why they're using their product and why they aren't using your product. But the objective of experimentation is to get to a thing called product market fit. And any experienced entrepreneur knows what that feels like. It's very difficult to explain. It's when you have so much business that your current ecosystem or systems in place are crashing all over the place. So if you've ever started a business and you thought you'd only do 5 sales and suddenly you're doing 100 sales and you have only 1 or 2 assistants, that's called product market fit. And so when you're at that stage, what you want to move is go to scale. And at scale, I'm sure you've heard of Series A funding rounds. That's what that is for. So you figured out the formula, I call it the engine, and how the engine runs, and how much fuel you need and how much money it throws off in terms of value capture. You want to now sort of build from prototype to now the real engine, something that's robust, secure, solid, doesn't break easy. And what you find that in a lot of those Series A rounds, a large portion of that money is actually going to marketing because you have a built-in acquisition cost. You want to take advantage of that inflection point. And what you're really chasing is now that you figured out, you don't want any of your competitors to figure it out. The reason why that piece is important is, remember, you are disrupting a business model or creating a new one. So once you figure it out, the secret's out. So you have to be fast to run. And that's why you see these astronomical numbers of these huge valuations. Some of them are valid, some of them are not, like any game in the world. And then At scale, what you're really trying to do is make sure you're building the most robust business. You have to sort of think about decisioning. I was very fortunate to go to Amazon, the London office, and I learned a lot there about decisioning, because the way those guys have structured their teams is that each job level is in charge of a decision time frame. So if you had a color code green, for example, you are 1 day decision maker. If you had a color code yellow, you were perhaps a 1 year decision maker. So the way you sort of looked at your role is, this decision today, how will it impact the business a year later if I'm yellow? And then red is thinking, this decision I'm making now, how does it affect the business tomorrow? And then the CEO at a scale business is thinking 2-3 years in time, because you have to remember you're trying to be big and impactful. And the problem with scale is you're moving so fast, you have to make sure you can still steer the ship with the same agility as when you were in the experimentation phase. So that's scale. And then the second thing you're doing with scale is you're creating your moat. So that thing that creates that defensiveness of your business. What you're really trying to do here is, and a good example is M-Pesa. The telcos, if you remember, and I know the age group here is of that time, the price wars. And then, and people were shifting. Kenya is one of those, we're a poor country, GDP per capita, $1,700. So, price sensitivity is real. So when they came up with M-Pesa and the competitor continued trying that price strategy, over time, Safaricom built that moat, that defensibility, because people now are saying, I can move, but I lose M-Pesa, and M-Pesa gives me so much value. I'm willing to sort of, pay the little extra, because it wasn't also that different in terms of price. Because by that point, and that's the problem of competing on price, price was as always a race to zero. And that's why you really need to move fast once you figure out the game. Then, of course, maturity is when now you become systemic. I think everyone knows that when Safaricom is down for 2 hours, our country stops. That's what systemic means. Facebook is down. In fact, forget Facebook. Google is down for 20 minutes and the world freezes. So that's systemic. That's how you know you're now maturity. I guess that's that stage. So what's the seed I want to plant? The seed I want to plant is, we are in an inflection point in Africa, and in particular Kenya. We've got, a decent playing field with the constitution in place and, strengthening judiciary. The rule of law is being obeyed more and more. And that's also happening in different markets across the continent. A lot of infrastructure has also been fixed or repaired, not just in Kenya, but across the continent. You've got a lot of smartphones now, internet data costs are coming down, smartphones becoming more accessible. And I think the most important, the other two are that, when I was doing KCSE in 05, we graduated and we were, 385,000. Last year, KCSE graduated just north of 1 million. And if you look at MOH statistics, you'll see that 1.5 million babies are being born every year, sorry. So it's, if you're a capitalist, that just sounds, that's just exciting, right? Like it's mind-blowing. So you want to take advantage of these various waves that are coming. You want to take advantage of those inflection points. But then, Africa is one of those places that has unique problems. And I think that if we can have more entrepreneurs solving these big problems and finding ways to solve them and exchange value for profit and build these very big startups, Africa could be the most modern place by 2050. I think we also have the education now, the experience. In all my travels, what blew my mind was I met a Kenyan everywhere. even in the weirdest places, working at the very highest levels, particularly in finance, which is pretty cool. You'd also be pleasantly surprised, a lot is happening, a lot of Kenyans are in engineering and cutting edge stuff. Africans actually. In fact, those once I even met a Malian who was building a very unique solution around agriculture in San Francisco. So, we're at that point where we've got a critical mass of very well-educated people. And so, if we have a mindset shift where we start thinking abundantly rather than scarcity, and then we sort of have, this objective to make 2050, we are the most modern place, we could solve unemployment, sustainable waste management, food security, and, any other problems you see. So that's my message. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, Kevin, for that inspiring talk. I'd love now to field questions. If you have a question you'd like to ask Kevin, this is opportunity. If you have a question, you can post it on the chat, or if you'd like, you can raise your hand and I'll give you the opportunity to ask. Just to kick it off, I've seen a question here on the chat from Victor Kenneth. He asks, how does one identify entrepreneurial opportunities? Share examples of moats. How can I create a moat for my company? And third, how do you cultivate a relationship with regulators and government? Just take those three then the rest will go on the rest.
So how do you identify entrepreneurial opportunities? You've got to be in the marketplace. You need to be talking to people. Entrepreneurship is a lot like politics. You need to know what's happening on the ground. So you need to really have a sort of a pulse. So sort of get a sense of what your skill sets are and what your competencies are and what types of problems you can solve. And then go start talking to those people and listening. A lot of times the best listening tells you the answers you're looking for. And then the other thing is make sure you're asking the right questions. We were trained to use the Socratic method where you're skeptical. So always sort of playing devil's advocate. What about this? What if I did this? But I saw so-and-so doing that. Why didn't that work, right? And then what you start doing is start beating something into shape because then you start seeing the picture more clearly. How do you build a moat and examples of moats? Again, listen to the data, listen to the customer. A good example of a moat is Google built a search engine. Once they got us all hooked, they gave us emails. Once they got us all hooked, they gave us Google Drive. And now, if you don't have Google, you don't have an Android phone. Those are all different types of moats that they've been building over the years. Fantastic business, Google. If you ever have time, spend a few hours just understanding Google from start to where it is today. It'll blow your mind. Another moat and closer to home is Safaricom, who's a telco, airtime, SMSs. They never really needed to start an M-Pesa financial services product, but they saw the data telling them that somebody was, people were exchanging credit and as value, right? So remember money, so it was doing what money should do, and they were like, hey, should we perhaps try this? And they tried and it worked, and that created their moat. And then third question, government. Well, the first realization about government is that it's not homogeneous. I think most of us, including me, when we look at government, we see the president as government, we see the politicians and MPs as government, we see the judiciary as government, and we see police, civil service as government. The truth is these are different power sort of centers that have been created by our society to keep all of them in check. So by design, they tend to have quite an antagonistic relationship. So what you really want to do is, one, understand who's important and why, and who has the most critical decision-making ability in your sort of ecosystem, and then start making inroads. Usually you want to know both the final decision maker and sort of the infrastructure below the decision maker, because the way information flows to the top is very different in different institutions. And there's a lot of gatekeeping at the top. So you need to know who you're talking to and why they would be listened to, etc., etc. There's this notion that every government official is corrupt. That's wrong. In fact, because of that, if you're not used to interacting with government, they can sense it and have a very sort of closed-minded opinion, and you will not be their preferred. So I always also like to remind people that government is your brothers, your sisters, your mothers, your fathers. They're human beings. Yeah, that's what I'd say.
Okay. Thank you so much for those responses. I saw Malaki had his hand up first. Malaki, go ahead and ask your question. I think we'll take 3, then we'll take the next 3. I don't know, does that work for you, Kevin?
Yeah.
So Malaki, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Thank you, Kevin. That was great. I just have a question. There's one thing, so being in finance, there's something that, financiers have a challenge with entrepreneurs is being a serial entrepreneur. Once one company is taking off, you're already on the next one. How do you go about, convincing such parties that this investment this time is the best, and that you won't jump ship to another investment later, another startup or idea?
Yeah, so again, sorry.
Just let me, Stalin, just go ahead and ask your question.
Oh, thank you. So my question is simple. Are there companies, and I mean Kenyan registered companies, that have made it from zero to hero without any government or political influence? Say like Airbnb or Twitter, because I only knew of SportPesa that was trying to touch that level, but we all know what happened. So what is your experience? And is your company registered in Kenya?
Thanks, Stalin. Then I see lastly, Kevin Macharia, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. My question is around the financing aspect of it, because I'm currently also in that startup space myself. And what I've experienced, I've seen there's so much VC funding that's available right now on the continent. There's a lot of capital that's flowing into the country. But the biggest challenge has been not accessing capital, but how to choose which capital to allow into your company, because a lot of times you find a lot of these VC guys would come in and they would want to dictate control over how the company should go. They're not necessarily opposed to the business model, but they're trying to dictate, especially some things that are operational. And for some of them, they actually have no experience about what goes on the ground. So what has been your experience in how you navigate around what kind of capital you accept into the company?
Thank you so much, Kevin. So Kevin Mutiso, go ahead with those 3 first.
Okay, so the first question was around serial entrepreneurship. So when I was explaining the 4 stages of a business, one of the key things that perhaps I should have mentioned is that just like in any other skill set, there's some people who are very good at the first phase, but get bored at the third and the fourth, because that's when it becomes robotic and very predictable. So there are people who like working on ideas and then handing them over. What I'll tell an entrepreneur like that is structure your business in a way that you can exit every time you get it to that inflection point, that product market fit. Pick your premium and go. There are many investors who do that. If you've ever heard of Reid Hoffman, legendary investor entrepreneur. I'm thinking of another one. I can't think of one top of mind, but there are many of those guys who just love that early phase. I think even Honam likes that type of business. And then, when you think about maturity, there are also entrepreneurs who just like mature business. And a good example is, Warren Buffett, for example. He wants a business that's proven business model, good cash flow, has built its moat, is willing to pay a fair price for that. And if you're an entrepreneur who's taking a business to that point, you always know Warren's going to buy your business. And he does. I mean, look at Apple. So different types of entrepreneurs for different stages. Or the other option is that they have an attention issue, and perhaps they've not found that sense of purpose. In entrepreneurship, that's important. I, for example, have sort of moved through different things because I've been trying to find that sense of purpose. And then, as I said, my last business taught me so much, and I met so many inspirational people that it changed my whole worldview and how I look at life and how I then now tackle life. So now I've found my voice, I've found my sense of purpose, and now I'm pushing that forward. Zero to hero. There's so many businesses that would blow your mind that are in Africa. Sandy is trying to fix, you said no government intervention, so that doesn't count. Twiga Foods is not yet at hero, but it's going to be one day. You've got a fantastic team there. Mobius is not yet at hero. We're also a young ecosystem, but I'm sure you're seeing their progress. And Mobius is a good example of local funding, Chandaria Capital, partnering with some foreign capital, figuring out tough problems, and never giving up. I don't think that business is profitable yet, but it will get there if they continue with the kind of vision and big balls that they have. But I'd also like to add a caveat. Kenya is such a small business, it's such a small economy. I mean, our total GDP is $100 billion, which is, a joke when you think about the US. I was on a call last week where a guy reminded me that Kenya's stock exchange does $2 million a day. I think Egypt does $100 million a day, and South Africa's does $2 billion a day. So we also need to know our place and just be, understand that you have to work with government in the political ecosystem. Again, not all politicians are crooks, and not all government guys are crooks. It's that mentality that, because if you hear the M-Pesa story, guys had to call, Mishuki when things stopped, and Mishuki then was given the pitch, and he's like, whoa, this could change Kenya, and then he, moves it forward to the next person. That guy, was given the pitch. And then, all those different pieces came together because they could see the potential. So, for example, in financial services, to look at the central bank in an antagonistic way would be completely unwise. And then financing and VC experience. I think the key point with VC when it comes to business models is, an investor is like finding a partner for life, a wife or a husband. You have to really critically think if you're willing to stay with this person for 10 years. And I'll give my personal story, for example, is I'm a second-time entrepreneur in Kenya, in Africa. I've done quite a bit of training, but I've not raised any money yet. And it's not that I'm a wealthy, cash-rich startup founder. It's just that I really want to partner with the right kind of capital. So I'll push and bootstrap until we find that person, and that's part of the reason why I do these talks, so that, you know, perhaps, you know, I could find potential partners who see that 20-year vision. You know, if you looked at Jeff Bezos' story, Jeff told his investors, this is a 20-year play, right? If you want dividend in year 5, I'm not the guy for you. And, you know, that's, if you get that off the table in the beginning, you know, then you're not going to be having fights for exits and etc, etc, etc. So yeah. And maybe the Jeff Bezos, not 20 years, I think it was 10 years, not 20. But a cool stat about Amazon is that on the 21st year, they made more profit than the first 20 years. So just a testament to compounding and long-term thinking. And yes, there's a lot of money on the continent, so shop. I mean, it's a buyer's market.
Thank you, Kevin, for that. So there are a couple of other questions on the chat. So the Violet asks, where can startups get financial support once one has a sound proposal? Secondly, Mercy asks, how can one scale up without getting into debt? Then Anita asks, thank you, Ken, for your insightful presentation. My question is around advice for funding for startups and importance of social capital and patenting business ideas. I think take those questions. Just, they're on the chat. Need to. Kevin, sorry, you're muted.
Sorry, I was saying hi to Ageshi. That's a good question. So one of the definitions I forgot to give was capital. So capital is, you know, if you mathematics, you know, 1 + 1 = 2. So capital equals resources. So, you know, it's just that most times capital is interchanged with money because money is you're able to measure it. But, you know, experience teaches you that capital is your network, your skin color, where the family you grew up, your context, your anything that is a resource to you that, you know, gives you a competitive advantage is capital. So debt is a type of capital. People have a thinking that debt is a bad thing, but it's not always a bad thing. And the caveat to that is that equity is the most expensive form of capital, because once you got equity in, you know, they're taking a piece of the return into perpetuity. Whereas debt, you know, if you get the return, they take a coupon, and, you know, you pay them back the principal, and you can continue sort of making that return over time. So it's a decision that you have to make at the point you need to make it. I don't know if that's a good answer, but I mean, if you can avoid debt because you have your own capital, you know, great. If you don't have your own capital, so what you do if there's somebody offering you debt, you have to make that decision. I hope I've also answered the advice for funding for startups and importance of social capital. So funding, you know, all VCs want is return, and you know, the attributes I mentioned about the startup. Are you solving? Have you defined your problem statement well, and does your solution solve that problem? Does your is your business model, you know, sort of shaking things up? And so is it disrupting, or are you creating a new market? And do you want to be big, right? Do you want to be big? And so you have to demonstrate that when looking for funding. You also people want to see your team. So your team, your entrepreneurial experience, and, you know, any of the other key success factors that I was talking about. If you're already making a profit, even better, right? So you're basically moving from experimentation straight to scale, you know, without getting anyone. And then patenting. Yeah, I mean, patenting is key, particularly for proprietary stuff. But one lesson you learn early in life in the game is there's no new idea under the sun. So the best way to, I call it chambuaring, is talk to people about your idea. It's rarely so good that they can run ahead without, if you have been thinking about it for a really long time. And then, this question of local company versus international company, I think the best way I'd answer that question is, my game is to return the best return for my shareholders. And some of our taxes actually make no sense. And so it's very difficult to convince a particular type of investor to set up Kenya Coast. But that's why you see me doing the kind of stuff around lobbying, because a lot of times the other side doesn't know. And I can confirm that. I spent a week, Monday to Friday, with the Treasury guys 2 Novembers ago, because of some work we were doing with them with DLAC. And we really had a really deep conversation about tax and tax from their perspective. They also see business people as enemies, the way we see them as enemies. And so a lot of times just that dialogue that needs to happen. And that's why I'm planting this seed, so that more of us sort of adopt this abundance mindset, because I've seen what it's done for me and what it's going to do for me. And if more of us thought like this, I think, again, 2050 most modern place on earth. Hope that answers.
Yeah. Thank you, Kevin. I don't see any other hand or question that is burning question, but if you do let us know. So lastly, I think let's take this lastly. Mercy asks, what are the key points to note or to account for when penetrating into another country? Yeah,
is
just
the
take
answer encountered in that problem, in that market. And how quickly can you get to the same size you're in that market? So, with my Buddha business, we've already identified the next market we want to go in. And the question we asked ourselves is, can we move from 0 to 60 in the same time like we did in Kenya? Because we feel like Kenya would be the best first place. And it was close enough. If you're doing digital lending, the next question you're asking is, will they pay me back my money? So are you going to do digital lending in DRC, for example? And I have nothing against those guys, but most likely the answer is no. So yeah, I hope that answers that.
Thank you so much, Kevin. At this juncture, I'd like to invite Rotarian Fred Angwin to do the vote of thanks.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to thank the speaker for such an amazing talk. It's been very exciting, mind-opening, and I think the seeds have been planted. So Kevin, thank you so much for your talk today, and hopefully you'll join us one more day for another one of all these meetings. And also thank you to all other Rotarians, Rotaractors, and guests for joining in this meeting, in this session. Thank you.